I need $2,000 for a car down payment. Can you cosign? My brother's kid texted. I answered, no way. Minutes later, my brother barked. Do it, or you're out. That night, I shut down their utility accounts. By 9:02 a.m., they were screaming in my voicemail and decided to take revenge on me. But I, Caleb, never understood boundaries. He's my 24-year-old nephew, my brother Todd's only son. And if you ever met him, you'd think he was raised by wolves. The way he talks to people, the entitlement, the zero effort to earn anything. It's like he skipped the whole process of becoming a decent human being. And the truth is, he kind of did, but as Todd, his father, let it happen. Todd's always been one of those men who thinks being a laid-back parent means letting your kid run wild while you do the bare minimum. Caleb never got told no, never got punished, never got a job either, but he always had nice sneakers, always had the newest iPhone, and always expected things to be handed to him. I tried not to get involved. I really did. For most of my life, I kept my distance from the dysfunction. But then 3 years ago, Todd called me in a panic. He'd lost his job, said he was behind on rent, didn't want Caleb to end up on the street. The guilt trip was so thick I could barely breathe, so I caved. I bought them a 2-bedroom condo in a decent neighborhood under my name since Todd's credit was a wreck, and I agreed to cover utilities until they got back on their feet. Todd promised it would be temporary, said he'd find work, said Caleb was looking into community college. None of that happened. Todd never got another job. Caleb never went to school. They just settled in like squatters who thought they'd won the lottery. The only difference was I kept paying for the lights and water. Fast forward to last Tuesday morning. I'm at work in the middle of a client call when I get a text from Caleb. I need $2,000 for a car down payment. You'll co-sign. That was it. No hello. No explanation, not even a fake please. Just this arrogant little punk assuming I'd open my wallet because why? Because I always had. I didn't reply for a while. I just stared at the screen, letting it sink in. Then I typed not happening. Felt good to hit send. 1 minute later, my phone rang. Todd, of course. He didn't ask what was going on. Didn't try to be reasonable. He barked into the phone like a boss giving orders. Do it or you're out. Those were his exact words. And I just sat there thinking out of what? I hung up. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, logged into all 3 utility accounts, gas, water, electric, and shut everything off. I didn't warn them. I didn't send a follow-up text. I just ended it. At 9:02 a.m. the next morning, my voicemail started filling up. Todd first, furious, swearing, then Caleb calling me a toxic B*********, and saying I ruined his life. Then Sierra, Caleb's girlfriend, who had somehow moved in without ever speaking a word to me, screaming about how this was abuse and that she had rights. I blocked them all. Around midnight, I got a message from Jenna, a neighbor in their building who I knew vaguely. Hey Harper, just FY, there was a lot of yelling from your place tonight. Looked like someone smashed something. Hope everything's okay. I drove over early the next morning. They weren't home, but the door was unlocked. I stepped inside and saw it immediately. Shards of broken glass all over the floor. My vase collection. 6 antique vases shattered. 1 was from Paris. 2 were hand-painted pieces I bought during a trip to Italy. 1 belonged to our grandmother. It used to sit in her hallway, always filled with lavender. I had stored them there because my apartment didn't have the space or the proper shelving. Now they were gone. Not just broken, destroyed, and still no apology, no call, no explanation, just silence. They thought they'd finally put me in my place. But what they didn't know is that I had one final move left in this one. It was going to change everything. I didn't cry when I saw the broken vases. I just stared, took it in. The silence in that apartment felt different now. Thick, final. The floor was covered in glass and dust. And for a second, I wondered how long they'd waited after the shut-off notices to get angry enough to do this. I could picture it. Caleb pacing, yelling about how unfair it was. Todd probably half watching from the couch. Sierra egging it on like she had any right to be in that space in the first place. And that's when it hit me. They actually believed it was theirs. That condo, the power, the water, the roof. They thought they owned it like I was just the sponsor who happened to be in the background. But it wasn't theirs. It never was. 3 years ago, Todd called me crying. Said he lost his job, needed a place for him and Caleb to stay just for a few months. He made it sound urgent, desperate. Said Caleb was going through a rough patch, and they just needed stability. I made the mistake of believing him. I used part of the money I had set aside for a second property and bought them that condo. Paid it in full under my name. Set up the utilities. Even paid the HOA fees so they wouldn't be overwhelmed. And they repaid me by turning into squatters. No rent. No offers to help. Just take. That night, after seeing the vases, I didn't call them. I didn't text. I went home, poured a drink, and opened my laptop. First, I scheduled the utilities for permanent disconnection. Then I emailed a locksmith. Next, I called a real estate lawyer I'd worked with during the pandemic when I had to handle a property dispute. By morning, the locks were changed. I had keys in my hand and legal paperwork on the way. By noon, a formal notice of eviction, complete with documentation of ownership, photo evidence of property damage, and a short note that read, "Effective immediately," was taped to the front door of the condo. I also posted a copy in the building's shared mailroom bulletin board. I wasn't being petty. I wanted witnesses. That evening, my phone lit up with a message from Jenna, the neighbor who lived a floor below them. They're outside the building screaming. Caleb kicked the door. Your brother's threatening to call a lawyer. You okay? I was more than okay. I waited 2 days before finally picking up one of Todd's calls. He must have borrowed someone else's phone because I didn't recognize the number. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't apologize. He just said I had no right, that I'd humiliated him, that I'd made his son homeless. I reminded him the condo was mine. The bills had always been mine, and that he and his grown son had lived off me for 3 years. The only things I'd gotten in return were broken heirlooms and screaming voicemails. He told me I'd regret this. I hung up. Over the next week, word got around. Family started calling. Todd was telling everyone that he'd bought the condo himself, that it was part of his investment strategy, and that Caleb was working on launching something big. The lies were ridiculous. My cousin Danielle called first. She's always been the grounded one. She asked, "You paid for that place? Are you serious?" I told her I was, and I had the receipts. Within 24 hours, half the cousins knew. Some tried to stay neutral, but most were done with Todd and his stories. One even said, "They needed this. You just happened to be the first one willing to do it." Then came the final step. I listed the condo. I wasn't keeping it, wasn't renting it out. I wanted it gone. The realtor staged it, took photos, and within 6 days there were 2 offers. I accepted one. That was it. Todd and Caleb had already moved out by then. Where to? I didn't know and didn't care. Probably couch surfing or living off pity. I thought that was the end. But 2 weeks later, they pulled something I didn't see coming. That's when this stopped being a family feud and turned into war. Selling the condo should have been closure. I'd cut them off, reclaimed what was mine, and closed the freeloading chapter. The walkthrough was clean, the buyer polite, and when the deal closed, I thought I had peace. But people like Todd and Caleb don't accept consequences. They don't learn lessons. They just look for new ways to blame you. And when the money stops, they go for blood. It started with a phone call from my manager. Thursday morning, his tone was polite but cautious. He asked if I had a moment. I walked into his office, expecting maybe a client complaint or a missed deadline. Instead, he held up a printout and said, "We received this." It was an anonymous email to corporate. Long, messy paragraphs accusing me of making sexist, hostile remarks during a client video call. The message accused me of being emotionally manipulative and unfit for a leadership role. No dates, no names, no meeting times, just pure fiction. The writing wasn't even professional. It was emotional, erratic, full of phrases like abusing her position and a long history of workplace toxicity. It was Caleb. I didn't even have to guess. He didn't have a job or responsibilities, but he had time. Time to sit in some cafe or whatever couch he was crashing on, fuming, plotting, typing up fake complaints. Thinking this would scare me. HR got involved immediately. They ran a standard review, interviewed a few coworkers, and found nothing. Of course they didn't. I've worked at this company for over a decade without a single issue. Within 48 hours, the case was closed, but Caleb wasn't finished. A few days later, a 1-star review appeared on our firm's Google profile. It mentioned me by full name, claimed I was unprofessional, mentally unstable, and that I regularly made derogatory remarks to clients. It ended with, "This woman should not be trusted in any financial setting." The review was flagged within an hour and taken down, but not before a couple coworkers saw it. Mark from HR asked if someone had a personal vendetta against me. I didn't lie. I said, my nephew. I evicted him from a condo I owned. He's retaliating. Mark blinked, then said, wow, that explains a lot. But that wasn't the worst of it. The following week, a fake LinkedIn profile showed up with my name, my photo, but a completely fabricated job history and bizarre posts about reclaiming feminine power through financial manipulation. It was creepy, designed to humiliate me, and that's when something in me finally snapped. They weren't going to stop. They weren't going to move on. Todd was too proud, and Caleb was too stupid. They wanted to drag me down, ruin my name, destroy everything I'd built. Not because I wronged them, but because I stopped being useful. I made a list. Every utility bill I'd paid, every grocery order, every rent equivalent calculation, every text where Todd asked for money and I sent it, every apology when he couldn't afford Caleb's birthday gift. I turned it all into a file, Todd and Caleb's civil case evidence. Then I hired a lawyer, a good one. He reviewed the file and said, we'll go after them for unpaid rent, utilities, and property damage. Possibly defamation, depending on how far these online attacks go. He was calm, confident, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. 3 days later, Todd got served outside a donut shop. Jenna, my old neighbor, even texted me a photo. Him holding the papers, looking confused and pathetic. Caleb got served 2 hours later in a Planet Fitness parking lot. Apparently, he threw the papers, yelled at the process server, then locked himself in his car. The total lawsuit, $46, $300. That was when they realized I wasn't bluffing. Todd started calling family, playing the victim, saying I was destroying the family name. Caleb posted cryptic nonsense on Instagram. Most cousins ignored them. Some messaged me privately with, about time. But then Sierra, Caleb's girlfriend, stepped in. She'd always been a smug freeloader, but after the lawsuit, she went further. She walked into my office pretending to be my niece, then sent me a text. Your coworkers are going to love what they see soon. A burner Instagram account appeared. Harper Truth exposed. Fake and edited photos of me in clubs, suggestive captions like, would you trust her with your business? She tagged my employer multiple times. It was a hit job that I stayed calm, documented everything, and gave it to my lawyer as defamation evidence. But before I could act, Sierra's employer fired her. Someone, maybe Danielle, maybe Jenna, sent the account to her company. They traced the IP back to her. She texted me later, begging to talk. I forwarded it to my lawyer. Then came Lisa, Sierra's ex, best friend. She sent me proof, screenshots and voice messages, showing Sierra had bragged about planting fake reviews, the complaint to my company, and even planning a counterclaim accusing me of financial exploitation. The evidence was gold. Around the same time, my aunt, who had always sided with Todd, called me. Todd and Caleb had shown up at her house, broke and desperate. She turned them away, then apologized to me. For the first time, she admitted she'd been wrong. 2 weeks later was court. No drama, no shouting, just silence, fluorescent lights, and the weight of years of evidence on my side. Todd looked worn down, Caleb looked careless, and Sierra didn't show. My lawyer sat beside me, calm and confident, and what they didn't know was that I had one last piece of evidence. Something I hadn't even told most of the family. I'd been holding back one last piece of evidence. 2 years earlier, Todd begged me for $7,500, claiming it was for Caleb's trade school. I wired it, labeling it tuition support. But instead of school, the money went to a gaming setup, Yeezys, and a spa trip to Tahoe. My lawyer subpoenaed their bank records, and we had receipts, right down to an Uber drop-off at the same hotel Sierra had posted about on Instagram. In court, Todd's lawyer argued I'd given money out of love, but Caleb made the bigger mistake, claiming I'd promised him the condo. My lawyer handed the judge a text where I clearly said, this is temporary. It stays in my name. Along with the deed and bills, their defense collapsed. Then came the final blow, a notarized affidavit from Sierra's ex, best friend Lisa, confirming Sierra and Caleb plotted the fake HR complaint, the burner Instagram, even a false police report. Judgment was entered fully in my favor, $46, $300 plus costs and damages, with a civil harassment injunction on top. 2 days later, I woke at 2:30 a.m. to scraping outside my apartment. Security cameras caught Caleb trying to pick my lock while Todd stood behind him. I called security and police. They were arrested on the spot for attempted unlawful entry. I didn't even need to press charges. The mug shots were enough to destroy what little credibility they had left BY that weekend. Sierra dumped Caleb publicly on Instagram, claiming she'd been misled and betrayed. My cousins laughed, saying it felt like the part of the movie where the villains finally fall apart. And that's exactly what was happening. Exactly what was